Crisis report.
Do you remember the laughter cast your mind back to 2019? The headlines were screaming. The pundits were snickering in their gin and tonics. The President of the United States wanted to buy Greenland. It was treated as a joke, a senile delusion of grandeur, a real estate mogul confusing a sovereign territory with a golf course in Florida. Well, look at the news ticker today. January 22nd, 2026. Nobody is laughing now. According to the New York Times, NATO is currently mulling a framework for U.S. sovereignty over key bases in Greenland. Not leasing, not borrowing, sovereignty. While the ink is barely dry on the inauguration paperwork, the White House is already redrawing the map. And this isn't just about ice and polar bears. This is the single most aggressive geopolitical pivot we have seen in decades, and almost everyone is missing the connection to the story happening 9,000 miles away in the Indian Ocean. Because at the exact same moment, Trump is demanding the deed to the Arctic. He is absolutely eviscerating the United Kingdom for the handover of the Chagos Islands. He's looking at London and asking, "Why are you giving away the keys to the kingdom?" Let's translate the diplomatic speak into plain English. The new administration views the world through a binary lens that the State Department bureaucrats hate tenants versus landlords. For 70 years, the West survived on leases. We leased bases in Germany. We leased access in the Philippines. We leased cooperation in the Middle East. We relied on the rules-based international order, a handshake agreement that said, "We'll protect you, you let us park our tanks here." That era ended 48 hours ago. The Greenland framework is the declaration of a new doctrine. The U.S. is no longer interested in being the world's policeman or the world's tenant. It wants to be the owner. If the strategic asset is essential to American survival, like the Arctic Shield against Russian hypersonics, the U.S. doesn't want a lease that can be cancelled by a grumpy parliament in Copenhagen or a protest in London. They want the dirt. And if you think this is just bluster, look at the timing. We are 2 days into the new term, and the message to NATO is crystal clear. We are securing our fortress. The question is, are you inside the walls, or are you the ones paying the rent? So why now? Why is the world map suddenly on the auction block? To understand the strategy, you have to ignore the noise and look at the signal coming out of Davos. While the global elite were sipping champagne and discussing carbon credits, Trump video linked in to drop a grenade. He warned Europe to drop the old playbook. He wasn't talking about economics. He was talking about survival. Here is the reality. The mainstream press is too polite to say out loud. The United States has realized that the old world is a liability. Look at the Chagos Islands deal. The previous UK government agreed to hand over sovereignty of the Chagos archipelago, which houses the critical Diego Garcia bomber base, to Mauritius. They argued it was about decolonization and international law. The Biden administration played along, trusting in leasebacks and assurances. The new White House looks at that deal and sees strategic suicide. They see a critical asset, the unsinkable aircraft carrier of the Indian Ocean, being handed over to a government that is increasingly cozy with Beijing. Trump's slam on the UK isn't just a tweet. It's a rejection of the idea that soft power works. The logic is brutal but coherent. If our allies like the UK are too weak to hold on to their own strategic geography because they are paralyzed by post-colonial guilt or legal bureaucracy, then the United States must secure its own geography ruthlessly. That brings us back to Greenland. The Arctic is the new Mediterranean. It is the route for shipping the vault for resources and the highway for the next war. Russia has planted its flag on the seabed. China is calling itself a near-Arctic state. The U.S. has realized that relying on Denmark, a frantic mid-sized NATO ally, to guard the northern gate of the American continent is a risk they are no longer willing to take. This is the Fortress Hemisphere strategy. Consolidate power in the Americas. Lock down the North Greenland. Pressure the South. We'll get to the Venezuela raids in a minute. And let the rest of the world know that the rent is due. But here's the catch. When you start treating allies like tenants and borders, like real estate deals, you create vacuums. And right now, while Washington is busy measuring the drapes in Nuuk, a massive void is opening up in the Middle East. And there is an old ally in Syria who just realized nobody is picking up the phone. Let's look at the old ally the New York Times is crying about today. The headline says, U.S. pivot in Syria leaves old ally in the lurch. It sounds tragic, doesn't it? It sounds like a betrayal. And if you are a Kurd sitting in a trench in Rojava right now, wondering where your air support went, it absolutely is a betrayal. But if you are a strategist sitting in the Situation Room, it's not a betrayal. It's a balance sheet correction. Here is the part everyone ignores because it's ugly. In the new sovereignty doctrine, alliances are not based on shared values or historical friendship. They are based on return on investment, ROI. For 20 years, the U.S. treated the Middle East like a high-maintenance vacation home. We poured trillions into the renovation, installed expensive security systems, and tried to tell the neighbors how to run their HOA. And what was the return? Chaos, resentment, and a $1 trillion bill. The new administration has run the numbers. They looked at Syria and asked, does this piece of real estate secure the American homeland? The answer is no. It's an away game. It's messy, it's distant, and thanks to American fracking, we don't need the oil. So they are cutting the loss. They are pivoting. But, and this is the critical connecting thread, they aren't retreating into isolationism. They are just moving the troops to the home game. Look at the other story buried in today's data, U.S. raid in Venezuela/Poles. Wait a minute. We are pulling out of Syria, but we are conducting raids and manipulating poll data in Venezuela. Why is Caracas more important than Damascus? Because Venezuela is in the fortress. This is the Monroe Doctrine on steroids. The logic goes like this. The world is breaking into blocks. Europe is aging and fragile. The Middle East is a fire trap. Asia is a pressure cooker. The only defensible position for the United States is the Western Hemisphere, North and South America, combined into a single impenetrable strategic fortress. Think of it like a homeowner. If a recession is coming, what do? You cancel the expensive gym membership across town. Syria. You stop paying for your friend's Netflix account. The UK/Chagos. And you spend that money building a high-tech security fence around your own property. Greenland. And kicking the squatters out of your garden shed, Venezuela. You can't have Chinese radar stations in Caracas if you're building a Fortress America. That is why the U.S. is suddenly hyperactive in Latin America while abandoning the Middle East. It's not hypocrisy, it's a consolidation of the perimeter. Let's dig deeper into the why. Why is owning the dirt in Greenland better than leasing a base in Germany? It comes down to the speed of modern war. In the old days, you had time to consult allies. You had time for a summit in Brussels to decide if we should shoot back. Hypersonic missiles don't give you time for a summit. They give you about 15 minutes. If a Russian hypersonic glider is coming over the North Pole, the U.S. president cannot afford to call the Danish prime minister to ask for permission to activate a radar or launch an interceptor from Thule Air Base. He needs sovereign command. He needs to own the switch. This is why the Greenland framework is terrifying to the Europeans. It signals that the U.S. anticipates a conflict where milliseconds matter and where coalition consensus is a liability. And frankly, the U.S. looks at Europe, specifically the U.K. handing over the Chagos Islands, and sees weakness. Let's be honest about the Chagos deal. The U.K. gave up sovereignty of the Diego Garcia archipelago to Mauritius. Mauritius, a tiny island nation that has taken massive infrastructure loans from China. The U.S. leases the base there. To Trump, this is insanity. It's like renting an apartment where the landlord, Mauritius, is best friends with the guy trying to break into your house, China. You don't do that. You buy the building, or you find a new building. The administration is effectively saying, if you guys are going to be soft, we are going to be hard. If you are going to sell off the strategic assets of the West, we are going to annex the ones we need to survive. This is a shift from collective security, all for one, to selective sovereignty. I'll take this, this, and this. It's smart. It's logical. It prioritizes American survival above diplomatic niceties. But here is the darker side of the equation. When you retreat into a fortress, you leave everyone outside the walls exposed to the wolves. We are pulling the blanket of security back to the Western Hemisphere. And do you know what happens when you pull the blanket too far? Your feet get cold. And in this case, the feet are the fringe allies, the ones living on the edge of the empire. The ones like Taiwan. The New York Times tells us Taiwan's military spending is stalled. They are paralyzed by political impasse. In the old world, Uncle Sam would step in and say, "Don't worry, we got you." In the fortress world, if you aren't paying your premiums and you aren't inside the walls, you might just be on your own. And that brings us to the ripple effect. Because while we are busy building walls in the Arctic and Caribbean, the fires we ignored in the Middle East are starting to merge into an inferno. So we have established the strategy. The United States is consolidating. It is locking the doors of the fortress. But in geopolitics, action and reaction are equal and opposite. When a superpower shifts its weight, the floorboards of the world creak. And right now, the floor is about to give way in two very specific places. First, let's look at the Taiwan variable. According to the Times, Taiwan's $40 billion military spending plan is stalled. Their parliament is fighting. They are hesitating. In a normal year, this would be a boring budgetary footnote. But in the context of the sovereignty doctrine, this is a flashing red siren. Why? Because the new American logic is transactional. If the US is abandoning old allies in Syria because the ROI is low and slamming the UK for being weak on Chagos, what does that signal to Taipei? It signals that the security guarantee is not a charity. It is a contract. And right now, Taiwan is in breach of contract. If Taiwan cannot pass its own defense budget, the Fortress America Doctrine says, why should we care more about your defense than you do? This hesitation in Taipei, combined with the U.S. pivot inward, creates a window of opportunity for Beijing. They smell the indifference. They see the U.S. distracted by its Arctic real estate deals and its Venezuelan raids. The stalling of that $40 billion package isn't just about money. It's a failure of will that could invite the very invasion they fear. And then there is the immediate fire Iran. A senior Iranian diplomat has just warned they will hit back with everything they have if attacked. Why the sudden escalation? Because nature abhors a vacuum. As the U.S. pivots out of Syria, leaving that old ally to dry, Tehran sees an opening to complete its land bridge to the Mediterranean. But they also see the U.S. consolidating. They know that once the fortress is fully built, the U.S. might stop caring about the stability of the Middle East entirely and just focus on containment. This makes Iran desperate to establish deterrence now. The ripple effect is clear. As the U.S. pulls back to the Western Hemisphere, the buffer zones of the world Eastern Europe, the Middle East, the South China Sea, become free fire zones. The local powers are left to fight it out. The winners, the ruthless, the ones who seize territory while the policeman is busy boarding up his own windows. The losers, the old allies who thought a 70-year-old treaty would save them from the new reality. Let's wrap this up. We are witnessing the end of an era, the post-World War II world, where the American flag was a blanket that covered everyone from Berlin to Seoul, is over. We are entering the age of real estate realism. If you have strategic value, if you have the Arctic ice Greenland or the Caribbean oil Venezuela, the U.S. wants to own you control you or absorb you. If you are a legacy project with high overhead and low return, like a base in a Syrian desert or a leased island in the Indian Ocean, you are on your own. Is it ruthless? Yes. Is it logical? Terrifyingly so. The old playbook that Trump mocked in Davos was built on the idea that stability everywhere was good for America. The new playbook says that America can only be stable if it stops trying to stabilize everywhere else. My prediction: for the next 48 hours, watch the United Kingdom. Prime Minister Starmer, or whoever is holding the bag, is in an impossible position. He can't reverse the Chagos deal without looking incompetent, but he can't ignore Washington's fury without looking weak. I predict a clarification statement from London, a desperate attempt to pause the handover of Diego Garcia. They will try to buy time. But in this new world, time is the one thing you can't lease. So here is the question I want you to answer in the comments below. Is the Fortress America strategy a genius move to save the country from imperial overstretch? Or is it a retreat that will leave the rest of the world to burn, eventually, setting the fortress itself on fire? Are we safer inside the walls? Or are we just trapping ourselves with the monsters? I'm reading every comment in the first hour. Let the debate begin. This is the intelligence briefing you won't get on cable news. Stay skeptical.